Hello movie lovers, I'm Jack Benner, and it's time to do my list, my top 10 favorite movies of 2019. And I gotta say, 2019 was an excellent year for movies. And this was quite a hard list to make given that there were so many great movies that came out in 2019. I had a hard time just switching, okay, maybe this movie there, and the placement of this movie there, this and that. After taking some time of seeing some movies that I feel like would make this list and arranging them, I am confident to do this list. A few things I want to say before getting into the list. Number one, I haven't seen every single movie that came out in 2019 since I've had a pretty busy year. For example, I've heard great things about The Farewell, but I haven't seen it. Second, please don't worry about the ratings I gave some of these films in my original review. You may see a film that I gave a 4.5 that might be above a 5 out of 5 film. I may have loved that movie upon further thought or a second viewing, so that's why it might be above the one I gave a 5 out of 5. So please don't worry about ratings in this list. Last and most of all, this list is entirely my opinion. These are the movies that I loved in 2019 the most, so this is all entirely my opinion. If there is a movie you disagree with on this list, that is fine. Feel free to disagree, and I respect your opinion. Now, before we get into the top 10 list, I have 8 honorable mentions in alphabetical order because it's how I like to arrange my honorable mentions. So here we go. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Booksmart, How to Train Your Dragon 3: The Hidden World, John Wick Chapter 3: Parabellum, Little Women, Shazam, Spider-Man Far From Home, and finally the one that just got knocked off the list unfortunately, Toy Story 4. All those movies are great movies and you should definitely check out those movies if you haven't seen them. And without further ado, let's get into the top 10 list. Coming in at number 10 is a tie. Now I saw these two movies recently and I loved them so much that I had a hard time deciding which one would make the list and which one would be an honorable mention. I would feel bad if I put one of these two movies as an honorable mention because I feel like both of these deserve to be on the list, so I decided to make a tie. First film at the number 10 spot, 10A, and all I have to say is, welcome back, Adam Sandler, Uncut Gems. The main reason I was interested in seeing this movie is because I always love seeing Adam Sandler take on a dramatic role and stepping out of his comfort zone. Because if you give him the right material, like a good script he can work well with, the right directors, and the right dramatic role for him, he can actually be a really good actor. For example, the movie Punch Drunk Love, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, he is fantastic in that movie. And honestly, this is his best role since Punch Drunk Love. He is amazing in this movie and should have gotten an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. On paper, this character should have been unlikable and you should hate this character throughout this movie because how much of an arrogant person he is. He has a gambling addiction, he's very greedy, and he cheats on his wife. But somehow, with Sandler's charm, humor, likability, and sympathy for this character, you actually want to root for this guy by the end of this movie. And the Safdie brothers did a fantastic job directing this movie, bringing their frenetic and relentless energy to this movie and their editing, and using that to give you anxiety throughout this movie, and many more bad decisions Adam Sandler's character makes in this movie. And this is right now one of my favorite A24 films, up there with Moonlight and The Disaster Artist. If you haven't seen Uncut Gems yet and it's playing at a theater near you, go see it. The second film at the number 10 spot, 10B, is one of two great Netflix movies on the list, Martin Scorsese's The Irishman. It was so great to see Martin Scorsese return to the mobster genre, Goodfellas, and Casino. With this movie, it's like he never left. Just how excellently he captured the time period, and how much of a well-shot movie this is. And the fantastic performances all around. Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci give their best roles in years. I also want to give credit to the de-aging effects. It looked very impressive. And also, the ending of this movie is some really powerful stuff. Just the way this movie deals with getting older and guilt for the horrible things that Robert De Niro's character did in the past. And it's truly some emotional stuff that I wasn't expecting before watching this movie. I was invested in the story throughout despite its 3.5-hour runtime. This is a long movie, and yet I watched it all the way through. And if you have Netflix and if you haven't watched this movie yet, warning, it's a very long movie at 3.5 hours, but if you like movies like Goodfellas and Casino, and if you're a fan of Martin Scorsese's movies, definitely check out The Irishman. It's a great one. At number 9 is one of the better music biopics I've seen in years, Rocket Man. Taron Egerton did an absolutely incredible job at playing Elton John. Both with doing all of his own singing, he has a fantastic singing voice, and getting the emotions of Elton John perfectly. I'm happy he won the Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Comedy or Musical, but he should have been nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor. He absolutely deserved a nomination. He should have been a lock. But what I loved about Rocketman is this movie wasn't just a standard musical biopic, and how this film was a fantasy musical biopic and using those elements that we're used to seeing in music biopics movies like Rise to Fame, Drugs and Alcohol, but using them pretty well and standing out from other ones. That's what I feel like makes this film unique. And the musical numbers are amazing, filled with energy, especially Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting, my favorite Elton John song. I love that sequence in the movie, the long takes of that. It kind of reminded me of the opening musical number of La La Land. A problem that I've had with Bohemian Rhapsody is it played it pretty safe, especially when it was about Freddie Mercury, who had an edgy life, and it was a PG-13, felt safe, followed the same formula. And this movie didn't shy away from anything. It showed the problems that Elton John had, his family life, how horrible his parents were, his problems with drugs and alcohol. It was truly heartbreaking. And I loved how this movie was more about the man, Elton John, rather than his music and success, and I appreciated that. If you love Elton John's music, and if you're interested in seeing a music biopic about him, definitely check out Rocketman. Coming in at number 8 is one of the most entertaining movies of 2019, Rian Johnson's whodunit mystery, Knives Out. This has been one of my most anticipated movies for the rest of 2019. I was so excited to see a whodunit mystery from Rian Johnson, and it did not disappoint in the slightest. How very funny this film is and how well written it is. Very happy this got an Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. How unpredictable this movie is with its twists and turns that some you don't see coming. And how Rian Johnson sets up little moments at the beginning of this movie, and how when they come into play later and looking back on this movie, it's pretty clever. And the fantastic ensemble cast from Daniel Craig, who I especially loved in this movie, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, Michael Shannon, Toni Collette, and many others were great too. I'm really glad that this movie did well not only with critics with a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, but also with audiences, and how this movie became a crowd pleaser. I can't wait for this movie to come out on Blu-ray. If you haven't seen Knives Out yet, please check it out. It's a blast. At number 7 is another great Netflix movie on this list, Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story. Marriage Story was a very moving and emotional portrayal of a divorce. Noah Baumbach's excellent script that doesn't make you choose sides between Scarlett Johansson's character and Adam Driver's character, and just show you the problems that they're going through and why they're not perfect for each other anymore. And speaking of which, Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson give their career best performances. Adam Driver's Best Actor Oscar nomination is very well deserved, but I want Scarlett Johansson to win Best Actress. She is my pick, but unfortunately, been hearing Renee Zellweger is the frontrunner right now, but I want Scarlett Johansson to win so badly. If you have a Netflix account and haven't seen Marriage Story yet, please watch it. Although it's an emotional watch, it's a must-see. At number 6 is one of the best sports movies I've seen in years, Ford v Ferrari. Matt Damon and Christian Bale are terrific in this movie, and I'm so glad to finally see these two in a movie together. While Damon gives a great performance, Christian Bale is truly fantastic in this movie, and this is one of my favorite performances from him, and he should have gotten an Oscar nomination for this role. But what makes this movie work are the riveting and thrilling racing sequences in this movie that I adored watching. James Mangold did an excellent job directing this movie and should have gotten an Oscar nomination for Best Director in my opinion. The incredible sound design, how well edited they are, the tension of those scenes. But what I also admired about this movie wasn't just a racing movie, and how it was able to give time to care about these characters, Ken Miles and Carroll Shelby. Carroll Shelby while facing corporate interference, and Ken Miles with his family life. And I felt like the drama helps to this movie, making you care about those racing sequences, adding tension to those scenes before it happens. I couldn't be any more happier that this got a Best Picture nomination. Please check out Ford v Ferrari if you haven't, or when it comes out on Blu-ray, definitely buy it and watch it with the best sound system. What a great movie this was. At number 5 is an epic achievement for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and finally, the highest grossing movie of all time that beat Avatar. Yes, Avengers Endgame. Endgame was absolutely worth the 10-year build-up, and it reminded me why I love the MCU and I'm a fan of it. Many good movies in the MCU, some better than others, casting the right actors, many directors that did a good job, the stories, the action, the humor, the drama. This is why I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how amazed at how perfectly it was set up, leading to this two-part story between Infinity War and Endgame. While it still has the sad tone taking place after Infinity War, it still has a good sense of humor and has plenty of funny moments. And I also admire, just like Infinity War, it wasn't afraid to take risks, especially with certain characters like Hulk and Thor, turning Bruce Banner into Professor Hulk, a combination of Bruce Banner's DNA and Hulk DNA. And I like that they did that, making the Hulk evolve, and I thought it worked perfectly for this movie. And with Thor, I can understand why some felt what they did with Thor, making him fat, was probably for comedic purposes, but to me it wasn't. I like that they did that. Yes, it did have its funny moments, but it's also heartbreaking given that's how people deal with failure, grief, trauma, and PTSD. And how much the events impacted Thor from Ragnarok, Infinity War, and at the beginning of Endgame. And this is showing Thor's progression into one of my favorite MCU heroes, and amazed the risks they take with Thor's character, making him vulnerable. And I also love that this was a very entertaining time travel movie, going back to events of the past, like the Avengers, Thor: The Dark World, Guardians of the Galaxy, and many great moments. But most of all, the climax of this movie is the definition of epic in a superhero movie. Final battle between the Avengers and bringing the Avengers back, the portals against Thanos' army, and the music that gives you goosebumps by Alan Silvestri, the portals theme, and then Cap gets Thor's hammer, and I definitely clapped at that moment when I first saw it in theaters. And then he says, "Avengers, assemble," just clapping and cheering and being excited. Easily the best action scene in the MCU, and also the ending of this movie is the most emotional ending of the MCU. I cried, got teary-eyed. 10 years of the MCU, being a fan, just leading to this moment was incredibly satisfying. And to Marvel Studios, Anthony and Joe Russo, Kevin Feige, the cast, that they were on top of their game in this movie. They really wanted to satisfy the fans so much, from Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Paul Rudd, Don Cheadle, and everyone else. I just want to say, I love you 3000. At number 4 is a movie I was excited for and was looking forward to it, but found a way to exceed my expectations. Jojo Rabbit. On paper, this movie shouldn't have worked. Just the outlandish idea of this movie, our main character Jojo wanting to be a part of Hitler's army and his imaginary friend is a goofy version of Hitler, this really shouldn't have worked. Any studio would say no to this, and it surprisingly worked so much. Because Jojo Rabbit delivers a great and satisfying arc for the main protagonist, Jojo. At first, he really wants to be a part of Hitler's army and he's indoctrinated with his beliefs about Jews. But when he meets Elsa and his beliefs start to change, and seeing him progress and grow throughout the movie, it's incredibly satisfying. And Taika Waititi did a fantastic job with this movie, directing, writing, and starring in this movie. With the top-notch production design, making this movie feel like World War II, even if it's an anti-hate satire. Also playing this very goofy version of Adolf Hitler hilariously, having so many funny lines in this movie, and this film proves why Taika Waititi is an upcoming comedic talent. And the very talented cast he assembled for this movie, from Roman Griffin Davis, who's a newcomer who plays Jojo, was excellent in this movie, one of the best child performances I've seen in years. He's great comedic talent for his young age, and he does well in the dramatic scenes as well. And I'm also very happy that Scarlett Johansson, hey, her third appearance on this list, got a nomination for Best Supporting Actress. She has been killing it in 2019. The Avengers Endgame, now the highest grossing movie of all time, and doing great work in acting for both Marriage Story and this. But what surprised me the most is how this movie was a well done mix of comedy and emotion. This movie is very funny for sure, but it also gets very dramatic, especially at the third act, when it starts to deal with the depressing aspects of World War II, and there was even one haunting image that has not left my head ever since I saw this movie in theaters, and it is one of the most heartbreaking shots of 2019, and it got me teary-eyed. Even though Taika Waititi's next film is Thor: Love and Thunder in 2021, interested to see what he does with that, but after that, I definitely want to see what his next independent comedy is. I'm loving this man right now. Just please go see Jojo Rabbit. It's excellent. At number 3 is one of the best character studies I've seen in a while, Joker. Joaquin Phoenix is astonishing in this movie, and he needs to win the Oscar for Best Actor right now, and luckily he is the frontrunner. I will be so happy when he wins the Oscar. He absolutely deserves it. And he does his own interpretation of the Joker, and playing the role of a mentally ill man just being down by society and just beginning his descent into madness is pulled off perfectly. And I also like that at the beginning of this movie, whenever his scenes, he combines laughing and crying. Very impressive acting by Phoenix. And for a while, I used to refer Todd Phillips, the director of this movie, the director of The Hangover. Well, after this movie and his recent Oscar nomination for Best Director, I'm not going to refer to him as the director of The Hangover. I am going to refer to him as the director for Joker from now on. He did an amazing job directing this movie and stepping out of his comfort zone, stepping away from raunchy comedies and delivering us a dark and gritty and unsettling character study on the famous Batman villain, doing an excellent job capturing the time period and using some elements of Martin Scorsese movies like Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, and I personally like those influences. The amazing cinematography and haunting music that I absolutely loved in this movie. My personal favorite musical score of 2019. Joker is a movie that I loved more and more ever since I saw this movie in theaters, and recently watching it for a second time on Blu-ray, I bumped this movie up to 5 out of 5 stars. Just, I love this movie so much. Coming in at number 2 is another fantastic movie from one of my favorite writers and directors, Quentin Tarantino, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Anything Quentin Tarantino does, no matter what it is, I instantly want to see it. Was so excited for this movie, was pretty high on my most anticipated list, did not disappoint me. And it was very apparent that this was Quentin Tarantino's love letter to late 1960s Hollywood, and capturing it perfectly. The top-notch production design, really good cinematography, the costumes, the great soundtrack. Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt are an awesome duo in this movie. They should do more movies together. They had amazing chemistry in this movie and played their characters very well, with Leonardo DiCaprio's character being part of these TV westerns but realizing his career might go downhill, and Brad Pitt plays his best friend who is also his stunt double, and he doesn't get that much work anymore. And the fantastic writing from Quentin Tarantino, how very funny this film is, might be Tarantino's funniest film, with the fight scene between Brad Pitt and Bruce Lee, and also the trailer scene that I heard was improvised by Leonardo DiCaprio. That was a great scene. And also, the climax of this movie might be my favorite ending in the Tarantino movie since Inglourious Basterds. And the build up to that scene and the tension and when everything goes crazy, it is jaw-dropping. I absolutely love this movie so much, put a smile on my face throughout. And if this film does have a chance at winning Best Picture at the Oscars, it could win, maybe, we'll see. But if it does, I'll be happy, because Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is amazing. And since Quentin Tarantino might retire from filmmaking when he gets to film 10, I am going to be very sad that day. And yet, this is only the number 2 spot. What could be my number 1? Well, let's get to it. And here we are, my number 1 favorite film of 2019. The movie I was highly anticipating for by the end of the year. A movie I was anxious to see, and it was worth the wait. And let's get to it. My number 1 favorite film of 2019 is, drumroll please, 1917 is my favorite film of 2019. This was the most riveting and immersive experience of 2019, and I saw this movie recently for a second time, and to confirm, it is my favorite film of 2019. I particularly loved the one continuous shot filmmaking for this movie that worked perfectly for it, now making it a unique World War I film. And Sam Mendes did an absolutely phenomenal job directing this movie, and he is my pick for Best Director. The fantastic production design, the look and feel of World War I, the tension of this movie. It does have a simple and straightforward story for this movie, but used very well with the intense story and just go, go, go throughout this movie. And the technical aspects of this movie were outstanding. The amazing musical score from Thomas Newman, especially 1600 Men and The Night Window, were fantastic musical scores. The amazing sound design that even in a few scenes made me jump, and it was very effective. And also, the cinematography from Roger Deakins is nothing short of mesmerizing. And Roger Deakins won his first Oscar for Blade Runner 2049, and he definitely deserves to win another one for this movie. This movie engrossed me from the first scene and gave me an experience unlike any other film that came out in 2019. And with that, 1917 is the best movie of the year. It's done. So happy to get this list done. Really glad. And that was my list of the best movies of 2019, and I would like to hear your guys' best of the year list. Top 5, top 10, let me know in the comments below. And also make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you're new here. It really means a lot. I'm Jack Benner, and look forward to another movie review.